In the heart of a stone-walled chamber dimly lit by flickering torches, the echo of forced laughter bounced off the cold granite. A young man in colorful, mismatched clothes stood at the center of a long hall, bells jingling from his hat as he tried to twist his body into yet another ridiculous shape. His name was Tomas, and he was the court jester, a fool by title, but no fool at heart. Outside, the castle was cloaked in a moody twilight. Inside, the court was restless, half-bored, half-drunk. The king sat slumped in his oversized throne, one hand lazily clutching a goblet of spiced wine, the other absently twirling a ring around his finger. His heavy eyes were on Tomas, but it wasn't joy or admiration that gleamed in them. It was expectation, the kind that chilled the skin. For most people today, when they hear the words court jester, they imagine a clown, a harmless, silly entertainer. But back then, in the thick of the medieval age, being a jester wasn't as fun as it sounds. Sure, the laughter seemed like a reward, but it was rarely sincere. The moment your jokes failed to land, or worse, offended the wrong person, your neck might end up on the chopping block. Tomas knew this better than anyone. He wasn't born a fool. He was once a stable boy in a village 2 days' ride from the capital. A quick wit and a clever tongue got him noticed by a traveling noble who saw him mimic the village priest with uncanny accuracy. That noble, amused and a little cruel, brought Tomas to court as a novelty. That's how it often happened. You didn't choose to be a jester. You got plucked from obscurity, painted in colors, and placed in a cage that looked like a stage. The truth was, it sucked to be a medieval court jester. It truly did. Most nights, Tomas lay awake on a straw-stuffed mattress in a cramped corner of the servants' quarters, listening to the sound of rats scuttling and guards stomping outside. He wore the same outfit every day, patched fabric, tattered sleeves, and those cursed bells that never let him sneak anywhere unnoticed. The bells, the bright colors, the ridiculous hat, they were all tools of humiliation. They told everyone he wasn't to be taken seriously. But Tomas had dreams. Quiet, dangerous dreams. He dreamed of being something more than a joke. He dreamed of slipping out of court, of finding his sister again, of escaping the fate that had trapped so many like him. But court jesters didn't get happy endings. They got laughs or they got punished. There was no freedom for someone like him. Not really. If he spoke too freely, the nobleman would whisper to the king that the fool was getting bold. If he refused to entertain, he'd be replaced, and replacements weren't always alive when they left. Some jesters vanished overnight. Some were found floating in moats or slumped behind the kitchens, mouths still curved in a final, silent laugh. The worst part? Everyone around him acted like he was lucky. Servants envied his position, thinking it brought him closer to power. But Tomas knew the truth. He had seen what happened when the court turned. He had seen another jester, Giles, mock a visiting bishop too cleverly. The next morning, Giles was gone. No explanation. No goodbye. Just silence. And still, each night, Tomas danced. He flipped, told jokes, acted foolish. But inside, his thoughts ran deeper than anyone guessed. He paid attention to the whispered conversations in the halls. He memorized the power games. He noticed which lords spoke behind the king's back, and which ladies-in-waiting passed secret notes when they thought no one was looking. One night, after a long, intense feast, Tomas was summoned by the king himself, not to the main hall, but to a private chamber. It was rare. Dangerous. He followed 2 guards through a torchlit corridor, his bells softly jingling with every step. The hallway twisted, and the stones felt colder here. The air changed. He could smell iron, and something else, something sharp, metallic, like blood and secrets. Inside the chamber, the king stood by a table. No crown on his head, no wine in his hand. Just a scroll unrolled in front of him and a serious look in his eyes. He didn't smile when Tomas entered. Didn't nod or speak for a long moment. Just stared. Tomas felt his throat tighten. "You have sharp eyes," the king said finally. "And a sharper tongue. Tell me, fool, what do you see when you look around my court?" This wasn't a joke. This wasn't a test of humor. It was something else. Tomas knew the wrong answer might end him. And yet, staying silent might be just as dangerous. He cleared his throat. "I see a stage, your majesty. A grand play. But some of the actors are wearing masks. And not all of them act in your favor." For a second, the king did not move. Then, a smile tugged at the edge of his mouth, small, but unmistakable. Not amusement. Approval. "Good," the king said, folding the scroll. "I need someone who can listen without being noticed. Someone who can laugh with the nobles and report to me. Would you like a better room? Better food?" Gold. Tomas swallowed. This wasn't a promotion. It was a deeper trap. But maybe it was also a chance. A step closer to something else. "I'm your fool, your majesty," he said with a slight bow. "I go where laughter takes me." And just like that, Tomas became more than a jester. He became a spy, an observer in plain sight. And yet, his life didn't get easier. It got far more dangerous. Now, when he danced, he was watching who clapped and who didn't. When he told jokes, he laced them with barbs and truths, testing reactions. When he smiled, he listened, always listening, always pretending. Because in the court, every word mattered. Every glance could mean betrayal. Every silence could mean death. There were nights he stood on the castle walls, looking at the moon and wondering if he'd ever get out, if he'd ever see his sister again, if he'd ever be free of the bells. But freedom came with a price. And in the medieval court, the price was steep. Betrayal wasn't rare, it was routine. The king's favor could shift overnight. Enemies were friendly faces. Allies turned the moment things got hard. And Tomas had begun to suspect something was wrong. Deeply wrong. He had overheard a whisper from a drunk knight about a plot, something about the queen, a letter, and a locked tower. He hadn't told the king yet. He wasn't sure if he should. Because what if the king already knew? What if it was a trap? What if he was being tested again? The weight of it pressed on his chest, even as he forced himself to smile and tumble and joke in front of the roaring crowd. He felt it. Something coming. A shift. A crack in the stone-cold court. Something was unraveling, and he was right in the middle of it. The bells on his hat jingled as he bowed low, one leg stretched, one hand over his heart. "Long live the king," he shouted as the hall burst into laughter. But no one noticed the flicker of worry in his eyes. And no one, not even Tomas, knew just how close he was to discovering a secret that could cost him everything, or change the kingdom forever. The night wore on. The torches burned lower. Somewhere deep in the castle, a door creaked open. And in the shadows, someone was watching him. Tomas had always believed that the cold of the castle was just the stone, the drafty halls, the long winters. But that night, after the feast ended and the guests stumbled out, he realized the cold came from something else, something unseen. He could still feel it as he walked down the hall alone, bells lightly jingling, back hunched slightly from exhaustion, heart drumming too fast for his slow steps. Someone had been watching him. Not just the usual way, not the passive stares of nobles amused by his act. No, this was something more focused, more intentional. He didn't turn around. He had learned long ago that turning to look when fear crept in only made things worse. Instead, he kept walking, acting like he hadn't noticed. But every step felt longer. Every flickering torch cast shadows that seemed to follow him just a breath too late. Back in his chamber, which wasn't much more than a corner near the servant quarters partitioned with a curtain, Tomas sat on the edge of his straw bed and listened. The castle at night was never silent. The guards marched in timed paces. The kitchen boys sometimes laughed too loudly when they thought no one important was nearby. Cats screeched in the courtyards. But tonight, even those sounds felt distant, muted. He took off his jester's cap slowly, folding it and tucking it beneath his thin blanket. The bells didn't jingle. He had stitched the cloth carefully so they could be muffled when needed. He never told anyone he did that. It was one of the small secrets he kept. Things that helped him survive in a place where laughter was used like a weapon. Tomas lay down, but didn't sleep. He stared at the wooden beams above his head, worn and cracked, and remembered the king's words. "Tell me, fool, what do you see?" That question hadn't left his mind. It sounded simple, but Tomas knew it wasn't. It was a question that opened doors he wasn't sure he wanted to walk through. He thought about the scroll on the table. He hadn't gotten a good look at it. But the way the king had stared at it, the way he had folded it so tightly, told Tomas it wasn't just some report. It was something important, maybe even dangerous. And then there was the whisper. That night, before being summoned by the king, he'd passed the chamber where the knights drank. It was mostly loud, clashing laughter and thumps of mugs. But there was a lull, a moment when two voices dipped low, too low for most to hear, but Tomas had sharp ears. "She's hiding it in the tower," one knight had said. "But if the king finds out," the other cut him off. "Don't be a fool. He already knows. That's why he sent the jester." That had stopped Tomas in his tracks. They couldn't have meant him, could they? He turned those words over again in his mind now, under the covers, heart racing slowly as the hours passed. The tower, the queen, a secret, in him, suddenly a part of something he didn't understand. He had to be careful, more careful than ever. In the morning, the castle woke with its usual rhythm, Slow, sleepy servants lighting hearths, the clanging of pots from the kitchen, the scrape of boots on stone floors. Tomas rose before the rest. He always did. It gave him time to watch without being seen. He dressed in a plain tunic instead of his jester's garb and wandered toward the kitchens, pretending to stretch and yawn like the others. But his mind was already working. He had to find a way to learn more. He knew the castle well, its corners, its passages, even the quieter stairways used by maids and lower staff. He used one of those now, slipping silently past a group of washerwomen gossiping near the water barrels. The tower. There were 3 towers in the castle, but only one was ever locked, the eastern tower, near the old part of the keep. It was rarely spoken of, and no one seemed to go there except the steward once every few days. Tomas had tried to sneak near it once when he was new to the castle. A guard stopped him before he got too close and gave him a warning look. After that, he stayed away. But now, something was pulling him back. He didn't try to go there directly. That would be foolish. Instead, he circled around, acting casual, asking questions that didn't sound like questions. He told the laundress that he'd lost a sock and thought maybe it had been blown out one of the drying windows. She laughed, said something about fools and their bright clothes. But she also mentioned that the eastern tower windows had been shut tight for years. No wind's blowing anything out of there, she said, shaking her head. That place is locked tighter than the Queen's diary. Tomas laughed along with her, but that comment stuck. The Queen. Again. Later that day, he performed in the main hall. A short set, just enough to keep up appearances. The king was distracted, barely looking at him. One of the nobles sitting near the Queen kept leaning toward her too closely. She smiled, but it looked thin, almost nervous. Tomas saw it. He saw everything. When the court laughter died down and the hall slowly emptied, Tomas wandered again, this time toward the library. It was one of the few places where people didn't question your presence. Knowledge, after all, was boring to most of the court. The librarian was asleep at his desk, his mouth hanging open slightly. Tomas moved past him without a word. He wasn't looking for a book to read. He was looking for patterns, history, secrets. And he found something. Not in a grand book, but in a small, leather-bound journal stuck behind others on a high shelf. It wasn't labeled. Inside, it was filled with notes, scribbled entries from someone who had lived in the castle long ago. A scribe, maybe. One page stood out. She continues to visit the eastern tower, though no one dares speak of it. Rumor claims something is hidden there. Not treasure, not gold, but something much heavier. A truth the crown fears. Tomas closed the journal quickly, pulse racing. He tucked it into his tunic. He would read more later. That night, while the rest of the castle drank and danced, Tomas slipped away again. This time, toward the eastern side. He didn't go all the way to the tower, just near enough to see. 2 guards stood at its base, unmoving, silent. And above, high near the top, a single window glowed faintly with candlelight. Someone was up there. He turned away quickly before he was noticed. Back in his room, he opened the journal again and flipped through more pages. The entries were scattered and didn't follow a clear order, but a few details emerged. A queen, long ago, had hidden something there. Something tied to the lineage of the throne. A secret child. A betrayal. The words were cryptic, but the pieces began to form a rough shape in Tomas's mind. Was history repeating itself? Was the current queen hiding something? And why did the king trust him enough to involve him in this? He wanted to believe the king saw his value, that his sharp eyes had earned him a place closer to truth. But another part of him wondered if he was just a tool, a pawn in a larger game. Days passed. Tomas continued to perform, to listen, to watch. The queen grew quieter. The nobleman who had leaned too close to her at the feast was no longer present. Whispers of illness were the official word. Tomas wasn't so sure. And then one evening, a page boy slipped a note under his door. No name, no signature, just 5 words. Stop asking about the tower. Tomas stared at it, the paper shaking slightly in his fingers. He hadn't asked directly. Not once. Whoever sent it was watching him closely. Someone knew. But instead of fear, a strange calm settled over him. He folded the note and tucked it away, then stood and walked to the small, cracked mirror beside his cot. He looked at himself, not as the jester, not as the fool, but as the man behind the mask. He was in this now, deep, and he needed to know the truth. Not just for the king, not just for himself, but because, somewhere in the castle, a secret was festering. A truth buried beneath laughter and lies. And if he didn't find it first, someone else would. The eastern tower window no longer glowed at night. The guards remained. The silence thickened. And far below, in a narrow hallway near the kitchens, the steward dropped a sealed letter into the fire. The wax melted slowly, the parchment curling into ash. In the shadows behind him, a pair of eyes watched. Silent. Waiting. Tomas's role was no longer to make the court laugh. It was to survive long enough to uncover what the jester was never meant to know. And the moment he did, everything would change. But change comes slowly in stone halls. And sometimes, laughter hides more than just pain, it hides the knife. Tomas woke before the sun rose, the chill air curling around him like a warning. He sat up slowly, still replaying the last few days in his mind. The letter burned in the fireplace. The glowing window. The guards. The hidden journal. And that note, stop asking about the tower. It wasn't just a threat. It was a sign. A sign that whatever was in that tower wasn't just a rumor passed around by bored servants. Someone was watching. And they were getting nervous. He got dressed without putting on his jester's cap. Today, he didn't want to wear the bells. He wanted to be invisible. His tunic was plain and a little worn, perfect for blending in with the crowd. He headed out, moving through the quieter corridors, the ones maids used when they wanted to avoid noble eyes. The castle never fully slept. Even before the morning meals, the halls had life. A scullery maid carrying firewood gave him a tired smile. A young stable boy yawned while pulling a cart of hay across the stone floor. Everyone looked half awake, their minds on chores, not secrets. Tomas used that. He moved like he belonged, like he wasn't doing anything more suspicious than looking for a missing scarf. But he wasn't headed to the main halls. He was going down, toward the cellars, where the air turned damp and the smell of old stone and preserved root vegetables hung thick. It was quiet here. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that made thoughts louder. He turned a corner, passing crates stacked high with dried meats and sacks of flour. Behind the storeroom, there was a locked door most people never paid attention to. But Tomas had seen the steward use it once. He pulled a pin from the sleeve of his tunic and knelt. The lock was old, rusted, not made to keep out someone determined. With a soft click, it opened. Inside was a staircase that curved downward. He took a breath and started walking, each step echoing. The deeper he went, the colder it became, like the stones themselves were warning him away. But he kept going. The stairs ended in a narrow corridor, the walls damp and rough. At the end, another door, this one heavier. Tomas pushed gently, and it opened with a low creak. The room beyond was dark except for a small lantern hanging from a hook. Shelves lined the walls, filled with scrolls and ledgers. Archive storage. Forgotten records. Tomas scanned the titles. Most were boring. Grain deliveries, tax reports, hunting permits. But tucked behind a row of moldy tomes was a worn leather book. No label. When he opened it, the first page bore the royal seal. His heart thumped. The pages were written in a steady, clean hand. Personal notes. Possibly the former queen's? Or a scribe assigned to record private matters. One passage caught his eye. The queen insisted the girl remain hidden. No one is to know of her birth. The king was told she died. But I saw her, alive, quiet, with eyes that mirrored her mother's. If the truth were ever revealed, Tomas stopped reading. A hidden child. So the whispers were true. Not just long ago, but maybe now. Maybe it was happening again. He tucked the book under his tunic and retraced his steps. Back up the stairs, back into the waking castle. When he emerged, it was already late morning. The halls were busier now, filled with voices and footsteps. But Tomas moved quickly, quietly, returning to his quarters and hiding the journal beneath his bedding. He needed help. Someone who could get close to the queen. Someone who knew more than they let on. He found her in the laundry room. Her name was Marta, a maid who'd worked in the castle for nearly 2 decades. She had sharp eyes and a way of knowing things no one told her. Tomas had watched her, listened to the way she avoided the more political gossip, but always seemed to know who was meeting whom, when, and why. He approached casually, pretending to be joking as usual, making the others laugh. But when Marta bent down to lift a basket, he leaned closer and whispered, "I need to talk." Privately. She didn't look at him right away, just nodded slightly. Later, in a side corridor near the herb gardens, away from ears, they met again. "You've been poking around," she said first, before he could speak. "Too much for your own good." "I need to know," Tomas said. "Is there someone in that tower?" Marta didn't answer at first. Her gaze moved to the sky, then the stone walls around them. When she finally spoke, her voice was low. "Years ago, before you were brought to court, A young girl was taken from the queen's chamber and hidden away. I never saw her face. But there were whispers. She wasn't supposed to exist. The king thought. He believed the child was lost. But the queen, she paused. The queen never cried. Not even once. Tomas frowned. Why hide her? I don't know, Marta said. But something happened between the king and queen that winter. A rift. After that, the eastern tower was sealed. And do you think the girl's still there? I think someone is, she said. And I think you're not the only one looking for her. That night, Tomas didn't sleep. He sat in the dark, listening to every creak, every gust of wind, every distant footstep. He thought of the girl in the tower, of what it meant if she was the king's daughter, alive, hidden, of the noble who had gotten too close to the queen, of the letter burned in the fire. Too many pieces, and all of them pointed to one thing, the throne. If the girl was the rightful heir, and the queen was keeping her secret, then someone would kill to control that truth, or bury it forever. The next day, the steward found him. He was summoned not to perform, but to walk with the king in the garden. A rare request. Unusual. Dangerous. The king was quiet as they walked, his hands behind his back, his expression unreadable. You've been busy, he said at last. Tomas said nothing. You've heard things, seen things. Still silent. I didn't choose you because you're funny, the king said, finally turning to him. I chose you because you see what others ignore. There it was. A confession. But Tomas didn't feel proud. He felt afraid. Tell me, the king said. What do you see now? Tomas hesitated, then said, I see someone trying to protect something, or someone, and others trying to use it. The king's eyes narrowed. And you? Where do you stand? Tomas didn't answer. The king nodded once. Be careful. A jester without a tongue is less trouble than one who speaks too much. With that, he turned and walked away. The warning was clear. Tomas felt the noose tighten. Back in his quarters, he pulled out the journal again, reading deeper. There were more clues. Mentions of names he didn't recognize. A noble family exiled suddenly. A midwife who vanished. A name, Lady Kalin, appearing several times. Always near mentions of the girl or the child. Who was Lady Kalin? Tomas started asking. Casually at first. At meals, among servants. He claimed it was for a joke he was writing. A silly play about forgotten ladies of the court. But someone noticed. He saw it in the way the steward started watching him more. In the way the guards near the eastern tower held their spears tighter when he passed. In the way Marta avoided his gaze now, as if protecting herself. He was getting too close. One night, someone entered his room. He heard the door open softly, but he was already awake. He lay still, pretending to sleep, breathing slowly. A figure moved toward his cot, paused, then knelt near the floorboards. Tomas had hidden the journal in a hollow space under the straw. The figure reached for it. With a sudden motion, Tomas lunged, grabbing the intruder's wrist. They struggled, quietly, fiercely. In the dim light, he saw a face he recognized. One of the young squires. Always in the background. Always watching. Who sent you? Tomas hissed. The boy didn't answer. They rolled across the floor, knocking over a stool. Footsteps approached. Someone must have heard the scuffle. The boy broke free and bolted. By the time the guards arrived, Tomas was alone, and the journal was gone. The next morning, the king didn't summon him. The queen didn't look his way. Marta wouldn't speak to him. The castle had turned colder, and in the eastern tower, the candlelight returned, brighter than before. A signal, maybe, or a trap. Tomas stood in the courtyard that evening, watching the window. He knew now that the girl, if she existed, was the key. To power, to betrayal, to truth. And someone wanted that key buried forever. But the jester was not just a fool anymore. He was a witness. And witnesses don't always live long. Tomas hadn't slept again. Not a full hour. His body ached from tension, and his mind wouldn't stop racing. Every corridor felt like a trap now. Every glance from a servant or guard carried suspicion. The stolen journal was gone, and he didn't know if the boy who took it had acted alone or on orders. He'd been too late to stop it, and now the only written proof he had was in someone else's hands. Worse, he couldn't be sure how much of it they understood. He kept replaying the king's words in the garden. Be careful. A jester without a tongue is less trouble. It wasn't just a warning. It was a test. The king knew Tomas was digging, and he was waiting to see what Tomas would do next. Every moment now felt like walking a tightrope across a blade. That morning, the queen's ladies-in-waiting passed him in the hallway. One of them, young Lady Anais, dropped her handkerchief as she walked by. Tomas bent to pick it up, and as he did, he noticed a small scrap of paper hidden inside. Kitchen. After sundown. No bells. He glanced up. Lady Anais didn't look back. She just kept walking, her posture perfect, her face serene. He folded the handkerchief and tucked it into his tunic. When evening came, Tomas did as told. No bells on his cap, no colors. He slipped through the kitchens unnoticed. Fires had died down. The cooks were gone. Only a few cleaning servants lingered, scrubbing pots. He moved to the back pantry, and there she was, Lady Anais, her hair covered by a plain scarf, eyes alert. "You asked about Lady Kaelin," she whispered. "That name hasn't been spoken in this castle for years. She was the queen's cousin, trusted. But she vanished the same winter the child was born." "Vanished?" Tomas asked. "Sent away. Quietly. But not before she helped deliver the baby. She knew everything." Anais glanced around. "I found something in the old sewing chamber last week. A note. I wasn't sure what it meant until now." She handed him a folded piece of cloth. Inside, sewn into the hem, were 2 words stitched in faint thread. "She lives." Tomas's heart pounded. "Where?" Anais shook her head. "The tower, maybe. Or not. The queen's kept this secret better than any war plan. But if others know now, if they have the journal," he nodded, "then she's in danger." They heard voices, approaching quickly. Anais slipped out a side door before the guards rounded the corner. Tomas stayed, pretending to inspect a basket of apples. The guards glanced at him, uninterested, and moved on. He clutched the cloth tightly. That night, he watched the tower again. The window was dark at first. Then, just after midnight, a flicker. Not candlelight. A different glow. Like a lantern swinging. Back and forth. Once. Twice. 3 times. A signal. Tomas didn't hesitate. He crept along the outer courtyard, avoiding the sentries. Climbed the side wall with the help of ivy and stones worn from years of storms. There was an old maintenance passage near the base of the tower, long forgotten. He slipped inside, moving slowly, silently. The spiral stairs were steep, and his legs ached by the 3rd level. He passed narrow windows, all sealed with iron bars. And finally, he reached a wooden door. It looked ordinary, but the air around it felt heavy, as if secrets pressed against the stone itself. He knocked twice, then once, then twice again. A pattern from the journal. Silence. Then, a creak. The door opened a sliver. A girl stood there, perhaps 15 or 16. Her hair was long and dark, her dress plain. Her eyes, he froze. He'd seen those eyes before. In portraits of the king when he was young, and in the queen's face when she thought no one was watching. "You're real," Tomas whispered. She nodded slowly. "You're not the first to find me, but you might be the last." She let him in. The chamber was small, lit by a single oil lamp. A bed, a chair, and books, dozens of them, neatly stacked. She moved like someone who'd learned stillness as survival. He realized she didn't flinch when he came closer. She had the calm of someone who'd grown up surrounded by danger. "They said you were dead," he said. "They say many things," she replied. "My name is Elira." He took a breath. "I think they know you're alive. Someone stole the journal." Her eyes didn't widen. She simply looked down. "Then I need to leave. It's not safe. You can't just run." "I know," she said. "But I can't stay either." Tomas sat, his thoughts spinning. "Why did the queen hide you?" Elira hesitated. "Because I'm not supposed to exist. I wasn't born out of love. I was born out of power. And the queen knew that if I lived, one day someone would try to use me against her. Or the king. She protected you." "Yes. But now, I think she's losing control." Tomas stood. "We need to find the queen. Tell her what's happening." "No," Elira said quickly. "We can't trust everyone. Not even her court." He paused. "Then who?" She reached under her bed and pulled out a cloth bundle. Inside was a pendant. Royal. Old. Etched with a crest he didn't recognize. "This belonged to my real grandmother. Before the queen. Before the crown. It's the only proof of who I am." Tomas stared. "They'll kill you for that." "I know." Suddenly, heavy footsteps echoed down the tower stairs. Tomas rushed to the door and peered through the keyhole. A shadow moved below. 2 men. Guards. Climbing quickly. "Someone followed me," he muttered. Elira grabbed the pendant. "We have to go. Now." He scanned the room. There was a small trapdoor behind the bookcase. "Where does that go?" "Down the laundry chute," she said. "It's old. Dangerous. Better than waiting to be caught." They pulled open the trapdoor, revealing a dark shaft. Tomas dropped a bundle of fabric down first to soften the fall. Then Alira climbed in, sliding out of sight. Tomas followed, the stone sides scraping his arms and back. They landed hard in a pile of old cloth beneath the laundry wing. Dust filled the air. Go, Tomas urged, pulling her up. They sprinted through the corridor, out into the side courtyard. Guards were everywhere now. Torches, voices shouting. Someone had raised the alarm. He grabbed Alira's hand and led her to the stables. Horses neighed nervously, disturbed by the noise. Take the bay, Tomas said. Fastest one. I can't leave you behind, she said. You have to. You're the key to everything. She looked at him, torn, then climbed into the saddle. Tomas handed her the pendant. Ride north, he said. Find the monks at the valley shrine. Tell them your name. They'll hide you. A door burst open behind them. Shouts. Go. She kicked the horse, and it bolted into the night. Tomas turned to face the guards. But it wasn't the king's men who arrived first. It was the steward, and the young squire who had stolen the journal. Both stood there unspeaking. The steward stepped forward. Where is she? Gone, Tomas said. You've ruined everything. No, Tomas said. I've started something. The steward raised a hand, and the guards moved in. Tomas was seized, dragged back into the castle. His hands were tied, his body aching. But he didn't resist. They brought him not to the dungeon, but to the great hall. It was empty, save for one figure seated at the throne. The queen. Her expression was unreadable. The steward knelt. He helped the girl escape. The queen's eyes locked onto Tomas's. She said nothing. Tomas broke the silence. She's your daughter. You can't deny that. I never did, the queen said softly. Then why all this? To protect her. And the realm. And you foolishly exposed her. I saved her. No, she said. You made her a target. Tomas stepped forward. She deserves to choose her life. The queen stared at him for a long moment, then turned to the guards. Find her. Tomas's heart dropped. No, she trusted you. I trust no one, the queen said. Not anymore. And as the hall doors slammed shut behind him, Tomas realized something terrifying. The queen wasn't trying to protect the girl anymore. She was trying to silence the past before it unraveled the future, and just when Edwin thought nothing could make this night stranger, he noticed something. In the flicker of the torchlight across the stone corridor, one of the jesters, not one he recognized, was watching him. Down a narrow hallway, past old shields and faded tapestries, into parts of the castle he had never been allowed to enter. The kind of places that smelled of mold, parchment, and secrets. The air grew colder, the stone more damp underfoot. The laughter and music of the feast faded behind him, replaced by the low sound of dripping water and the scrape of rats. Finally, at the end of the passage, he saw a door ajar. A pale light came from inside. He pushed it open and stepped in. Books, dozens of them. Scrolls, maps, candles. And in the center, the strange jester, standing beside a man Edwin had never seen before. But the second man was not dressed like a jester. He wore long robes, stitched with symbols Edwin couldn't place. Circles, daggers, suns with eyes. You're not supposed to be here, the man said without looking up. Edwin backed away a little. I was looking for, you were looking for answers, the stranger jester interrupted. His voice was calm, but not friendly. And now you found too many. The robed man looked at Edwin now. His eyes were strange, too calm, too knowing. You're the jester who won the king's favor, aren't you? He asked. Edwin nodded slowly. And yet you wonder why the others keep their distance. Why the food tastes strange. Why you never sleep without nightmares now. Edwin felt a chill run through him. They knew. But how? You're not the first to be chosen, the jester added. You're just the first in a long time who lasted this long. Chosen for what? Edwin asked, his voice nearly a whisper. The man in the robe closed a book slowly. To be seen, heard, laughed at, distracted. You think being a medieval court jester was all jokes and bells? No, it was sacrifice. You're not entertainment. You're the mask they use to hide their rituals. Their history. Edwin's knees went weak. What rituals? The robed man didn't answer. Instead, he turned and lifted a cloth from something resting on a pedestal. A skull. Painted. Cracked. Small bells wired into the eye sockets. Edwin froze. It was a jester's skull. He was like you, the man said. Too curious. Too clever. And when the court grew tired of their amusements, they gave him a final role. Behind Edwin, The door creaked. Another figure entered. A maid, one Edwin had seen in the feast hall. But her eyes were blank. She was holding something, a plate? No, a mask. A jester's mask. Just like Edwin's. It was too much. He ran. Back through the corridors, through the dust and dark, tripping on stone, barely breathing. He burst back into the feast hall. But everything had changed. The musicians were gone. The food was cold. The laughter had stopped. And every single person in the room was looking directly at him. Even the king. The silence was loud. "Ah, our favorite performer returns," the king said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. But the fun is only just beginning. Edwin backed away as the courtiers began to rise from their seats, slowly, like puppets pulled by strings. Someone laughed. Not joyfully, not nervously, but low, deliberate. It was the strange jester again, stepping forward, mask in hand. "You asked why history is so boring," he said. "It's not. It's just buried. Under lies. Under blood. Under people like you, who dance too close to the truth." The courtiers began to chant something. Low at first, then louder. A word Edwin didn't know. Repeated. Over and over. The torches dimmed. He turned to run again, but the doors were gone. Stone. Seamless. The walls were closing in. Or maybe it was his mind. He thought about all the tales he'd heard growing up. That jesters were lucky to be near kings. That they lived better than peasants. That they were free to speak their minds. But no one ever said what happened when they spoke too much. Then, the king raised his hand, and the chanting stopped. He gestured to the mask. "Put it on," he said. Edwin shook his head. "No, I didn't agree to any of this." "You agreed the moment you made us laugh," the strange jester whispered. And just like that, the room went black. Only the sound of bells. Faint. Distant. Then silence. When Edwin woke, he was in his quarters. Daylight streamed through the narrow window. His costume hung neatly by the bed. For a moment, he thought he'd dreamed it all. Until he saw the mask. Sitting on his chest. Waiting. He shoved it off, heart racing. He paced the room. He needed to get out. Leave the castle. Walk away. But the gates, he'd never seen them opened. Not once. Not in weeks. And the guards never talked. Never moved much unless summoned. He tried anyway. That afternoon, he dressed in plain clothes, kept his head down, and tried to slip past the kitchens toward the outer wall. A hand caught his arm. It was the cook, usually drunk, often singing, but now deadly serious. "Don't," she whispered. "They'll know." "I can't stay," he whispered back. "They chose you for a reason. If you leave, they'll send the mask after you." "What does that mean?" The cook looked around, then pulled something from her apron. A letter, burned at the edges, in messy, desperate script. "I found this in the larder years ago. From the last one." Edwin unfolded it. Just a few lines. "They see everything, even your dreams. Run, but don't run far. They find the ones who stray too far from the laugh." He didn't know what to make of it. But that night, he didn't sleep. He didn't even lie down. And still, he dreamed. Of fire. Of masks on every face. Of bells tolling in the dark. When he woke, the mask was gone from his room. But painted on the wall above his bed was the word he'd heard chanted. In red, dripping. Edwin wiped it with his sleeve. It didn't come off. He had to make a choice. Play along, become the fool they wanted, or find out what lay beneath the mask and risk becoming part of the history no one talked about. And deep down, he already knew. This was never just about jokes. It never was. It was about silence. About shadows. About power hiding behind painted smiles. And he was in too deep now. The next day, he was summoned to perform again. This time, not in the hall. In the catacombs. A secret banquet. Guests with masks. The king was there. So was the robed man. And behind them, a row of empty chairs. But as Edwin stepped up to begin his act, he saw what rested on each seat. Masks. All different. All waiting. And the moment he opened his mouth to speak, the torches flickered. A door creaked. And someone laughed. Not from the audience. From the shadows behind him. The voice was familiar. It was his. But he hadn't laughed. Not yet. Edwin stood frozen, the echo of his own laughter reverberating through the dimly lit catacombs. The masked figures seated before him remained motionless, their faces hidden behind expressions of mirth and menace. The air was thick with anticipation, the silence pressing down like a weight. Suddenly, the king rose from his throne, his ornate robes rustling softly. He descended the steps with deliberate grace, each footfall echoing ominously. In his hand, he held a scepter adorned with intricate carvings of jesters and fools. "Edwin," the king intoned, his voice resonating through the chamber. "You have entertained us well, but now the final act awaits." Edwin's heart pounded in his chest. He glanced around, seeking an escape, but the walls seemed to close in, the shadows deepening. The masked figures began to chant softly, a rhythmic incantation that sent chills down his spine. "What is this?" Edwin demanded, his voice trembling. "What do you want from me?" The king approached, lifting the scepter. "To reveal the truth, dear jester. To unmask the past and awaken the present." With a swift motion, the king tapped the scepter against the ground. The chamber trembled, and a hidden door creaked open behind the throne. A blinding light spilled forth, illuminating a hidden passageway. Compelled by a force he couldn't resist, Edwin stepped forward, the masked figures parting to allow his passage. He entered the corridor, the light enveloping him. As he progressed, the surroundings transformed. The stone walls gave way to lush tapestries depicting scenes from the kingdom's history. He saw images of jesters performing, their faces contorted in agony rather than joy. The realization struck him. These were not mere entertainers, they were sacrifices. At the end of the corridor, Edwin entered a grand hall filled with mirrors. Each reflection showed a different version of himself: the humble jester, the inquisitive seeker, the terrified fugitive. In the center stood a pedestal with an ancient tome. He approached and opened the book. The pages detailed the kingdom's dark history, the rituals performed to maintain power, the jesters used as vessels to absorb the kingdom's sins. Edwin's role had been predetermined, his fate sealed the moment he donned the jester's garb. A sudden noise behind him made Edwin turn. The king stood at the entrance, his expression solemn. "You see now," the king said, "the truth hidden behind laughter." "Why me?" Edwin asked, despair evident in his voice. "Because you dared to question, to seek beyond the facade." The king extended his hand. "Join me, and together we can end this cycle." Edwin hesitated, then grasped the king's hand. A surge of energy coursed through him, and the mirrors shattered, releasing the trapped souls of past jesters. Their laughter filled the hall, not of mockery, but of liberation. The kingdom above trembled as the dark enchantments unraveled. The masked figures in the catacombs collapsed, their purpose fulfilled. Light pierced the gloom, and the castle's oppressive atmosphere lifted. Edwin and the king emerged into the daylight, the courtiers and townsfolk gathering around. The king addressed them, revealing the truth and declaring an end to the old ways. As the crowd dispersed, a young boy approached Edwin, holding a jester's mask. "Will you teach me to make people laugh?" the boy asked. Edwin smiled, taking the mask. "Yes, but this time, the laughter will be genuine." Unbeknownst to them, in the shadows of the castle, a figure watched, a smirk playing on their lips. The cycle had ended, but the echoes of the past lingered, waiting for the next act to begin. Edwin stood on the castle's highest balcony, watching the sun rise over the kingdom. The air was crisp, and the scent of dew-laden grass wafted up from the gardens below. The events of the past weeks played in his mind like a vivid tapestry, each thread woven with laughter, fear, and revelation. The court had changed. The oppressive rituals that once lurked in the shadows were now memories, replaced by genuine merriment and transparency. The king, having shed the weight of ancient traditions, now ruled with a newfound wisdom. The courtiers, once masked and silent, engaged openly, their faces reflecting true emotions rather than painted expressions. Edwin's role as the medieval court jester had transformed. No longer a pawn in hidden games, he became a symbol of change, a reminder that even in the depths of tradition, there lies the potential for renewal. His performances now brought genuine joy, his tales weaving lessons from the past with hopes for the future. One evening, as the stars blanketed the sky, Edwin gathered the townsfolk in the great hall. Children sat cross-legged at the front, their eyes wide with anticipation. He began a story, his voice gentle yet firm, recounting the journey from darkness to light, from fear to freedom. The audience listened, captivated, their imaginations. One morning, as he wandered the castle grounds, he stumbled upon an old, weathered book in the library. Its pages detailed tales of jesters from ages past, their stories eerily similar to his own. Among the entries, he found a note. "To those who wear the mask, remember, laughter can be a shield, but truth is the sword that breaks chains." Edwin closed the book, a sense of peace settling over him. He realized that his journey was part of a larger tapestry, a continuum of souls seeking light in the darkest of places. As the sun set, casting golden hues over the castle, Edwin stood once more on the balcony. He looked out over the kingdom, now vibrant and alive, and whispered, "May the echoes of our laughter guide those who come after. and may they find the courage to unmask the truth. And with that, the story of the jester who changed a kingdom came to a close, leaving behind a legacy of hope, transformation, and the enduring power of truth.